Hey, wild hearts. What happens when sworn enemies can't keep their claws or their eyes off each other? When ancient pack grudges collide with forbidden attraction, and two rival alphas discover that sometimes the greatest threat isn't your enemy's fangs, it's the way they make your heart race when they bare them. Chapter 1. The scent hit Kira Blackwood like a slap across the face. Pine, leather, and something dangerously masculine that made her wolf pace restlessly beneath her skin.
She knew that scent.
Had been trained to hate it since she could first shift. Grayson Sterling. Her lips curled back in a silent snarl as she crouched behind the massive oak tree, watching the Silver Ridge patrol mark territory that wasn't theirs. The audacity of these wolves never ceased to amaze her. 3 months since the old Alpha's death, 3 months since she'd claimed leadership of the Shadow Moon Pack, and already the neighboring pack was testing her boundaries. "Alpha," whispered Jake, her beta, his voice barely audible even to her enhanced hearing. "They're a full quarter-mile into our territory." "I can see that," Kira muttered, her amber eyes tracking the 4 Silver Ridge wolves as they moved with practiced arrogance through her forest. But her gaze kept returning to their leader, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the fluid grace of a predator who'd never known defeat. The last time she'd seen Grayson Sterling, she'd been 16 and he'd been 18. Even then, he'd carried himself like he owned the world. Now, 6 years later, he'd grown into those confident shoulders, and the boy who'd humiliated her pack in front of the council had become a man who apparently thought he could steal her land. "Orders, Alpha?" Jake's tension bled through their pack bond, along with the nervous energy of the 3 other Shadow Moon wolves flanking them. Kira's decision crystallized the moment Grayson lifted his head, nostrils flaring as he caught their scent. A slow, infuriating smile spread across his face, the same cocky grin that had haunted her dreams for years. He said something to his patrol, and they fell back while he stepped forward, hands raised in mock surrender. Well, his voice carried easily through the forest, rich and warm like aged whiskey. "If it isn't little Kira Blackwood. Though I suppose it's Alpha Blackwood now, isn't it?" The condescension in his tone made her see red. She rose from her crouch and stepped into the clearing, her own wolves flanking her like shadows. "It's Alpha Blackwood to you, Sterling. And you're trespassing." "Am I?" He tilted his head, and damn him, he was even more attractive than she remembered. Dark hair that looked like he'd run his fingers through it, steel-gray eyes that seemed to see right through her, and a mouth made for either kissing or smart-ass comments. Right now, it was definitely the latter. Funny, I could have sworn this was disputed territory. Disputed by whom? The Silver Ridge Pack has a legitimate claim to this land. The river boundary was never properly surveyed after the 1987 territorial agreements. Kira took 3 steps closer, close enough to see the flecks of green in his eyes, close enough to catch his scent properly. It was intoxicating and infuriating in equal measure. The river boundary has been solid for 38 years. Just because your pack is feeling cramped doesn't mean you can steal our land. Steal? Grayson's eyebrows rose, and he had the audacity to look amused. "That's a strong accusation, Alpha Blackwood. Almost sounds like you're calling my honor into question. If the fur fits." The temperature in the clearing seemed to drop several degrees. Both packs tensed, hands drifting toward weapons, wolves stirring restlessly beneath human skin. But Grayson just laughed, a low, rough sound that sent an unwelcome shiver down Kira's spine. "You know what I love about you, Kira?" He took a step closer, closing the distance between them until she had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. "You never did learn when to back down. And you never learned when to stop pushing. Some things are worth pushing for." There was something in his voice, something that made her wolf sit up and pay attention in ways that had nothing to do with territorial disputes. For a heartbeat, the forest fell silent around them, as if even the trees were holding their breath. Then Jake cleared his throat. "Alpha, we should establish the facts," Grayson interrupted smoothly, never taking his eyes off Kira. "I propose a formal survey. We each bring a representative to walk the boundary lines with a neutral party. Unless, of course, you're afraid of what we might find." The challenge was clear, and they both knew she couldn't back down without losing face in front of both packs. Kira's jaw clenched.
Fine.
But when the survey proves this is Shadow Moon territory, I want your word that Silver Ridge will respect our borders. And when it proves our claim is legitimate, Shadow Moon withdraws from the disputed zone. His smile was sharp as a blade. Deal. They were standing close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, close enough that when she extended her hand, their fingers brushed as they shook. The contact sent electricity shooting up her arm, and from the way his eyes darkened, he felt it too. Deal, she said, proud that her voice remained steady. His fingers tightened around hers for just a moment longer than necessary. I look forward to working with you, Alpha Blackwood. The way he said her title, like it was both a challenge and a caress, made her stomach flip. She pulled her hand back, immediately missing the warmth of his touch and hating herself for it. The feeling isn't mutual, she lied. Grayson's smile widened. We'll see about that. He stepped back, gesturing to his patrol. They melted into the forest as silently as they'd arrived, but Grayson paused at the tree line. Oh, and Kira? You might want to check your eastern border. I caught an interesting scent there earlier, something that doesn't belong to either of our packs. Then he was gone, leaving her staring at the empty forest and wondering if his parting words were a threat or a warning. Knowing Grayson Sterling, it was probably both. Alpha. Jake moved to her side, his dark eyes concerned. Do you really think it's wise to work with Silver Ridge? After everything that happened between our packs. Kira's hand still tingled where Grayson had touched it. The memory of her father's funeral 6 months ago flashed through her mind. How Grayson had stood at the back of the ceremony, his presence both unexpected and strangely comforting. How he'd approached her afterward, offering condolences that seemed genuine despite their pack's history. I don't have a choice, she said finally. If I refuse, it looks like we have something to hide. Besides, it's just a boundary survey. How dangerous could it be? Jake's expression suggested he thought it could be very dangerous indeed. Should I contact the council about a neutral surveyor?
Do it.
And Jake? I want extra patrols on all our borders, especially the eastern boundary. If there's something else out there, I want to know about it before it becomes our problem. As her beta moved to carry out her orders, Kira remained in the clearing, staring at the spot where Grayson had vanished. Her wolf was still agitated, confused by the conflicting signals of attraction and animosity. She'd spent 6 years preparing to take over the pack, 6 years training and studying and proving herself worthy of her father's legacy. She'd been ready for challenges from neighboring packs, ready for political maneuvering and territorial disputes. What she hadn't been ready for was the way her heart had stuttered when Grayson Sterling smiled at her like she was the most interesting thing he'd seen in years. Get it together, Blackwood, she muttered to herself. He's the enemy. Remember that. But as she turned to head back to pack lands, she couldn't shake the feeling that the most dangerous thing about Grayson Sterling wasn't his ambition or his pack's territorial claims. It was the way he looked at her like he could see straight through all her carefully constructed walls to the woman beneath the Alpha facade. Like he knew exactly which buttons to push to get under her skin. Like he was planning to do it again very soon. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it sent a thrill of anticipation racing through her veins that she absolutely refused to acknowledge. Chapter 2. The council chambers of the Mountain Ridge Pack felt like a courthouse designed by wolves, all dark wood, high ceilings, and the lingering scent of dominance displays. Kira adjusted her blazer for the 5th time as she waited in the anteroom, trying to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. You don't have to do this, Jake said quietly, his beta instincts picking up on her tension. We could still call it off, cite scheduling conflicts. And look weak in front of the council?
Kira shook her head. No.
If Grayson wants to play games, I'll beat him at his own rules. The heavy oak doors swung open, and Elder Patricia Thornfield emerged, a silver-haired woman whose reputation for fairness was matched only by her intolerance for pack politics. Alpha Blackwood, Alpha Sterling, you may enter. The mediator is ready. Kira's step faltered when she entered the chamber and saw Grayson waiting at the opposite table. He dressed for battle in a charcoal suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and made his gray eyes look like storm clouds. When he spotted her, his gaze traveled from her professional updo to her fitted black dress and back again, lingering just long enough to make her skin heat. "Counselor," he said, inclining his head with perfect politeness. The formal address was technically correct. She did have a law degree, even if she'd never practiced, but something in his tone made it sound almost intimate. "Alpha Sterling." She kept her voice crisp and professional as she took her seat, hyper-aware of the way his scent carried across the room despite the formal setting. The mediator turned out to be Samuel Cross, a neutral wolf from the Eastern Territories known for his no-nonsense approach to territorial disputes. He spread a series of maps across the central table, each one marked with different colored boundaries. "Gentlemen, excuse me, Alpha Blackwood, Alphas. We're here to resolve the boundary dispute regarding the Whispering Creek territory. Alpha Sterling, present your case." Grayson rose smoothly, moving to the display maps with the kind of confidence that came from years of courtroom experience. "Elder Cross, the Silver Ridge Pack's claim is based on 3 key factors." As he began outlining his argument, historical precedent, pack migration patterns, resource allocation, Kira found herself grudgingly impressed despite her irritation. He was good at this, weaving together legal precedent and pack law with the skill of someone who understood both worlds. Furthermore, Grayson continued, his finger tracing along the disputed boundary. The 1987 Territorial Agreement specifically states that boundaries should follow natural landmarks. The creek's current path clearly favors the Silver Ridge claim. "Except," Kira interjected, rising to her feet, "the creek hasn't followed that path for over a decade." She moved to stand beside him at the map, close enough to catch his scent, but far enough to maintain professional distance. "Alpha Sterling is basing his claim on outdated information." She felt rather than saw his sharp glance as she spread her own documents across the table. Recent surveys, photographs, GPS coordinates that told a very different story. The creek was diverted in 2013 following the hurricane damage, she continued, her voice gaining strength as she warmed to her argument. The current boundary follows the new watercourse, which places the disputed territory squarely within Shadow Moon lands. "An interesting point," Samuel mused, leaning forward to examine her evidence. "Alpha Sterling, were you aware of the creek diversion?" The slight tightening around Grayson's eyes was the only sign that she'd caught him off guard. "We were aware of weather-related changes, but our surveys indicate." "Your surveys are 12 years old," Kira cut in smoothly, enjoying the flicker of annoyance that crossed his features. "Mine are from last month." For a moment, they stood facing each other across the table, and the air between them crackled with more than just professional rivalry. Then Grayson smiled, slow and dangerous, and Kira's stomach did an unwelcome flip. "Touché, counselor. It seems you've done your homework." "I always do." "I'm beginning to see that." Samuel cleared his throat pointedly. "If we could return to the matter at hand, I'd like to propose a site visit to examine the current boundaries in person." "Absolutely," Kira said immediately. "Agreed," Grayson nodded. "Though I should mention, there may be complicating factors." "Such as?" Samuel's weathered face creased in a frown. Grayson's expression grew serious. "We've had reports of unusual activity near the eastern boundaries of both territories. Something that doesn't belong to either pack." Kira's blood chilled. "What kind of activity?" "The kind that suggests we might have bigger problems than a boundary dispute." His gray eyes found hers across the table. "I was hoping we could discuss it privately after the session." The formal request was proper, but something in his tone suggested urgency. Samuel seemed to sense it too, because he began gathering his papers with increased efficiency. "Very well. I'll schedule a site inspection for tomorrow morning. We'll meet at the Whispering Creek trailhead at 8 a.m. sharp." He paused, glancing between them. "I trust you can both behave professionally in the field?" "Of course," they said simultaneously, then shot each other irritated glances. Samuel's lips twitched. "Excellent."
Dismissed.
As the formal session ended and people began filing out, Grayson lingered near the map table. Kira hesitated, torn between curiosity and the very reasonable urge to get as far away from him as possible. "Jake," she said finally, "wait for me outside. I'll be just a moment." Her beta's expression suggested he thought that was a terrible idea, but he nodded and left, closing the heavy doors behind him. Suddenly, the vast chamber felt much smaller. "You wanted to talk," Kira said, proud that her voice remained steady. "So talk." Grayson moved closer, lowering his voice. 3 days ago, my patrols found something on the eastern boundary. Dead wildlife, completely drained of blood. No wounds, no signs of struggle. Natural predation. No. He cut her off. This wasn't natural. And it wasn't shifter work either. He paused, his expression grim. "When was the last time your people checked the eastern border?" "Yesterday." They reported nothing unusual. But even as she said it, Kira remembered the patrol's odd comment about the forest being too quiet. Then either they missed it, or whatever's doing this moved after they left. Grayson stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "Kira, I think we might be dealing with vampires." The word hit her like a physical blow. Vampires hadn't been active in pack territory for decades, not since the supernatural accords had established boundaries between species. "That's impossible," she said automatically. "The Treaty of Salem. The treaty assumed both sides would honor it." His voice was grim. "What if they're not?" Kira's mind raced through the implications. If vampires were hunting in pack territory, it would mean war between species. It would mean pack members in danger, traditional boundaries meaningless, and the careful balance of supernatural politics shattered. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "If there's a vampire threat, that's pack business. My pack business, if they're in my territory." "Because the scent trail crosses both our lands," he said quietly. "Whatever's out there doesn't care about our boundary disputes. It sees all of this." He gestured toward the maps, as hunting grounds. The weight of his words settled over her like a shroud. A vampire incursion would require resources neither pack could spare individually, especially not while they were locked in territorial disputes. "What are you proposing?" she asked, though she was afraid she already knew. "A temporary alliance. Joint patrols, shared intelligence, coordinated response." His gray eyes were steady on hers. "Put the boundary dispute on hold until we deal with the real threat." Every instinct screamed at her to refuse. Allying with Silver Ridge, even temporarily, would be seen as weakness by some pack members. Working closely with Grayson would be complicated, given her inconvenient attraction to him. But if he was right about the vampires... "I need proof," she said finally. "Not just your word. Physical evidence." "Fair enough. Tomorrow's site visit will give us the perfect cover to investigate together."
He paused.
"Assuming you can handle working with me for more than 5 minutes without trying to tear my throat out." "I can be professional," she said stiffly. "Can you?" "Because from where I'm standing, you look like you want to either fight me or..." "Or what?" The words came out more breathless than she'd intended. His gaze dropped to her lips for just an instant before returning to her eyes. "I think you know." The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with an electricity that had nothing to do with pack politics and everything to do with the way he was looking at her like she was the most fascinating puzzle he'd ever encountered. "This is a mistake," she whispered. "Probably," he agreed. "But if I'm right about the vampires, it's a necessary one." Before she could respond, he stepped back, the spell broken. "Tomorrow morning, counselor. 8 a.m. sharp. I'll be there. I'm counting on it." As he moved toward the door, he paused without turning around. "And Kira? That was impressive legal work today. Your father would be proud." The comment hit harder than any insult could have, mainly because it sounded sincere. By the time she recovered enough to respond, he was already gone, leaving her alone in the chamber with the lingering scent of pine and leather and the uncomfortable realization that Grayson Sterling might be more dangerous than she'd ever imagined. Not because he was her enemy, but because she was starting to think he might not be. Outside, Jake was pacing the hallway like a caged wolf. "How did it go?" "We're doing a joint site inspection tomorrow." She started walking toward the exit, needing to put distance between herself and the chamber that still held traces of Grayson's scent. Joint with Silver Ridge? Jake's voice rose in alarm. Alpha, that's necessary. She cut him off. There may be external threats we need to investigate. What kind of external threats? Kira paused at the building's entrance, looking back at the imposing structure where she'd just agreed to work with her pack's traditional enemy. The kind that make pack feuds seem like playground arguments. As they drove back towards Shadow Moon territory, Kira couldn't shake the memory of Grayson's expression when he'd mentioned the vampire threat, or the way her heart had stuttered when he'd almost said she looked like she wanted to kiss him. Because the terrifying truth was, for a moment there, she had. And that was more dangerous than any vampire. Chapter 3. Kira arrived at the Whispering Creek trailhead 15 minutes early, determined to be the first one there. What she hadn't counted on was finding Grayson already waiting, leaning against his black SUV with 2 steaming coffee cups and that insufferable smile. Punctual, he observed, straightening as she parked. I like that in a partner. The word partner sent an unwelcome thrill through her system. We're not partners. We're temporarily cooperating. Of course. His eyes danced with amusement as he offered her one of the cups. Peace offering? It's from that little cafe in Pine Ridge, the one that actually knows how to make coffee. Kira hesitated. Accepting meant acknowledging his thoughtfulness, but the rich aroma was already weakening her resolve. She'd been up since 4 a.m. reviewing territorial maps and running patrol reports. Fine, she said, taking the cup. Their fingers brushed during the exchange, and she pointedly ignored the spark that shot up her arm. But this doesn't mean I trust you. Wouldn't dream of it. He took a sip of his own coffee, studying her over the rim. Though you might want to consider it eventually. We're going to be spending a lot of time together. Before she could ask what he meant by that, Samuel Cross's vehicle pulled into the small parking area. The elderly mediator climbed out with the careful movements of someone whose bones remembered every winter they'd survived. Alphas, he greeted them, consulting his watch. Right on time. Shall we begin? The first hour of the inspection went smoothly. They hiked along the creek bed, with Samuel taking GPS measurements and photographs while Kira and Grayson maintained a careful distance from each other. The boundary dispute seemed almost secondary now, a civilized disagreement compared to the threat potentially lurking in the shadows. The water diversion is clearly documented, Samuel observed as they reached the disputed section. Alpha Blackwood's survey appears accurate. The territory in question falls within Shadow Moon lands. Kira felt a surge of vindication, but Grayson just nodded thoughtfully. I can accept that determination. She blinked in surprise. Just like that? Just like that. His gray eyes held hers steadily. When I'm wrong, I admit it. When I'm not. He let the sentence hang with a slight smile. Samuel packed up his equipment with satisfaction. Excellent. I'll file the official determination by end of week. Unless there are any other boundary issues to address. Actually, Grayson said, there is one more section Alpha Blackwood and I need to survey. The eastern boundary near Devil's Hollow. Kira's pulse quickened. That was where he'd mentioned the unusual activity. I don't have that area on my survey list, Samuel said, frowning. It's a separate matter, Grayson explained smoothly. Pack security concerns. We can handle it ourselves. Very well. Samuel gathered his gear. I'll leave you to it. Remember, professionals only, no territorial pissing matches in my forest. After the mediator left, an uncomfortable silence settled between them. They were alone now, without the buffer of neutral oversight, and Kira was acutely aware of how isolated this section of forest was. So, she said finally, Devil's Hollow. About a mile northeast. Grayson shouldered his pack, which she now noticed was significantly larger than what he'd need for a simple boundary walk. Fair warning, what we might find there won't be pleasant. I can handle unpleasant. Can you handle the possibility that everything we thought we knew about supernatural politics is about to change? The seriousness in his voice made her stomach clench. Show me. The hike to Devil's Hollow took them deeper into the forest than any normal patrol route. The trees grew denser, older, their canopy blocking out most of the morning sun. Kira's wolf grew increasingly agitated the further they went, sensing something fundamentally wrong with this place. "There," Grayson said quietly, pointing ahead. "Do you smell it?" Kira inhaled deeply and immediately wished she hadn't. Beneath the normal forest sense of earth and growing things was something else, something cold and metallic and utterly wrong. "Death," she whispered. "Not just death. Look." They crested a small rise and found themselves looking down into a natural depression surrounded by massive oak trees. What should have been a peaceful forest clearing looked like a slaughter ground. Dead animals, deer, rabbits, even a few squirrels, lay scattered across the space in various stages of decay. But it was the way they died that made Kira's blood freeze. Every single animal was completely intact except for 2 small puncture wounds on the neck. No torn flesh, no claw marks, no signs of a struggle. Just empty husks drained. "Jesus," she breathed. "It gets worse." Grayson led her down into the clearing, pulling latex gloves from his pack. "Look at the spacing, the positioning. This wasn't random feeding." He was right. The carcasses were arranged in a rough circle around a central point where the grass had been scorched black. Symbols had been carved into the surrounding trees, symbols that made Kira's wolf whine in distress. "This is ritual," she realized, horror creeping into her voice. "They're not just hunting. They're performing some kind of ceremony." "That's what I was afraid of." Grayson knelt beside one of the deer, examining the wound pattern. "These puncture marks, they're too precise, too clean. And the blood loss is complete. No vampire feeds this efficiently unless they're collecting for a specific purpose." Kira moved to the center of the circle, studying the burn pattern in the grass. "How long since you found this?" 3 days. "I've been monitoring it, hoping for more information before." He stopped abruptly, his head snapping up. "Before what?" "Before they came back." The words had barely left his mouth when Kira heard it, the sound of something moving through the forest within human speed. Not the natural gait of any forest creature, but something that flowed like liquid shadow between the trees. "Run," Grayson said, his voice deadly calm. "What about?" "Run." They bolted from the clearing just as the first vampire materialized at the tree line. Kira caught a glimpse of pale skin, red eyes, and fangs that gleamed like ivory before Grayson grabbed her hand and hauled her up the far slope. Behind them, she heard the distinctive sound of more vampires arriving, the whisper of displaced air, the soft thud of feet that barely touched the ground. "How many? 3? 5? In her terror, it was impossible to tell. "This way," Grayson panted, pulling her off the main trail onto a narrow deer path that wound between massive boulders. "There's a cave system up ahead." "Caves?" Kira's wolf was screaming at her to shift, to fight, but she forced herself to keep running in human form. "That's your plan? Trap ourselves underground." "Trust me." "I don't." A vampire dropped from the canopy directly in front of them, landing in a crouch with predatory grace. It was a woman, beautiful in the way that poisonous flowers were beautiful, with platinum hair and eyes like fresh blood. Well, the vampire purred, straightening slowly. 2 little wolves, so far from their packs. Grayson stepped protectively in front of Kira, and she felt the change ripple through him as he prepared to shift. "Kira, when I say go." "Oh, I don't think so." The vampire smiled, revealing fangs that were definitely not designed for clean feeding. "You've seen too much. Both of you." She moved faster than human eyes could follow, but Grayson was ready. He shifted mid-lunge, his clothes shredding as his body transformed into a massive silver-gray wolf. He hit the vampire midair, and they went down in a tangle of fur and fury. "Go," he snarled, the word distorted but recognizable. Kira ran, crashing through underbrush as inhuman sounds of battle echoed behind her. She could hear more vampires converging on their location, drawn by the commotion. How many were there? And what the hell were they doing this deep in pack territory? She found the cave entrance just as something cold grabbed her ankle. Pain shot through her leg as razor-sharp nails dug into her skin, and she went down hard on the rocky ground. Not so fast, little Alpha, a male voice hissed. We have questions for you. Kira twisted around to see another vampire, this one dark-haired with a kind of pale, sharp beauty that spoke of centuries of hunting. His grip on her ankle was like a steel trap, and she could feel her bones grinding together under the pressure. Let go of me, she snarled, letting her wolf rise enough to flash her fangs. Such a fierce little thing. The vampire smiled, leaning closer. Tell me, do you know what your territory contains? What lies beneath the ground you're so eager to protect? I don't know what you're talking about. No? How interesting. His grip tightened, and Kira bit back a scream. Perhaps your companion will be more forthcoming. That's when she heard it, a pained howl that could only have come from Grayson. Her wolf went berserk, flooding her system with adrenaline and rage. You son of a bitch, she growled and shifted. The transformation was violent, fueled by fury and desperation. Her clothes tore as her body expanded, muscles and bones reshaping themselves into her wolf form. The vampire's grip loosened in surprise, and she used the moment to twist free and sink her teeth into his wrist. He screamed, actually screamed, as her fangs found bone. Vampire blood was like acid on her tongue, burning and wrong, but she held on until he released her completely. Clever girl, he hissed, cradling his wounded arm. But not clever enough. He backhanded her with his uninjured hand, and even in wolf form, the blow sent her flying into the cave wall. Stars exploded behind her eyes as her head connected with stone, and she felt consciousness slipping away. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was Grayson's wolf form appearing at the cave entrance, silver fur stained with blood that definitely wasn't his. The last thing she heard was his howl of pure rage echoing through the forest. And the last thing she felt was the vampire's cold hands lifting her unconscious form as everything went black. When Kira woke up, she was going to discover that being captured by vampires was only the beginning of her problems. Because what they wanted wasn't just her territory. They wanted the ancient power buried beneath it. And they were willing to use her and Grayson to get it. Chapter 4. Consciousness returned to Kira in fragments, the taste of copper and ash in her mouth, the burn of silver shackles around her wrists, and the unmistakable scent of vampire magic thick in the air. She kept her breathing steady and her eyes closed, listening for any clue about where she was and how many captors surrounded her. I know you're awake, little Alpha. The voice belonged to the dark-haired vampire who'd grabbed her at the cave. Your heartbeat gave you away 5 minutes ago. Kira opened her eyes to find herself in what looked like an abandoned warehouse, all concrete floors and rusted metal beams. Industrial chains hung from the ceiling, and symbols similar to those at the ritual site had been painted on the walls in what looked suspiciously like blood. She was bound to a metal chair with silver chains that burned against her skin every time she moved. Across from her, perhaps 20 feet away, Grayson was similarly restrained. His shirt was torn and bloodied, but his gray eyes were alert and furious when they met hers. About time, he said, his voice hoarse. I was starting to think they'd hit you harder than I thought. I'm fine. The lie came easily, despite the pounding in her skull. You? Oh, Peachy. Just enjoying the hospitality. 3 vampires stood between them, watching this exchange with a kind of predatory interest that made Kira's skin crawl. The woman from the forest was there, along with the dark-haired male and a third vampire she didn't recognize, an older-looking male with silver hair and eyes like winter ice. How touching, the woman said. Even captured, they're more concerned about each other than themselves. Serafina, the silver-haired vampire's voice carried the authority of centuries. Enough games. We have work to do. So the woman was Serafina, and silver hair was clearly in charge. Kira filed the information away while testing the strength of her bonds. The silver burned, but the chains weren't tight enough to prevent all movement. You're right, Matthias, Serafina purred. We should get straight to business. She moved closer to Kira, her pale fingers trailing along the metal arm of the chair. Tell me, Alpha, what do you know about the Moonwell? Kira kept her expression blank despite the shock that raced through her. The Moonwell was pack legend, an ancient source of power supposedly hidden somewhere in the ancestral territories. Most modern wolves dismissed it as mythology. Never heard of it, she lied. Serafina's hand moved faster than lightning, backhanding Kira hard enough to split her lip. Try again. I said I've never heard of it. Kira spat blood, glaring up at the vampire. And even if I had, I wouldn't tell you.
Brave.
Stupid, but brave. Matthias stepped forward, his ancient eyes studying Kira with uncomfortable intensity. The Moonwell isn't legend, child. It's very real, and it lies somewhere beneath your precious Shadow Moon territory. Grayson's chains rattled as he shifted in his chair. What the hell is a Moonwell? Power, the dark-haired vampire, the one Kira had bitten, answered. His wrist was wrapped in black cloth, but she could smell the infection spreading through his system. Apparently werewolf bites were as toxic to vampires as vampire bites were to wolves. The kind of power that could reshape the balance between our species. According to the old records, Matthias continued, beginning to pace between their chairs. The Moonwell was created during the first wars between vampires and shifters. A concentrated source of lunar magic, powerful enough to either strengthen werewolves beyond imagining or what? Kira demanded. Or destroy them entirely, depending on who controls it. The implications hit her like a physical blow. If such a thing really existed in Shadow Moon territory, and if vampires gained control of it.
You're insane, she said.
Even if this Moonwell exists, what makes you think I know where it is? Because you're not just any alpha, Serafina smiled, showing too many teeth. You're a Blackwood. Your bloodline has guarded Shadow Moon lands for over 2 centuries. If anyone knows the location of ancient pack secrets, it would be the daughter of Marcus Blackwood. At the mention of her father, Kira's wolf snarled, pressing against her human consciousness. She forced it down, knowing that shifting would be impossible with the silver restraints. My father never mentioned any Moonwell. Perhaps not directly, Matthias agreed. But he knew. They always know the Blackwood Alphas. It's in their blood, passed down through generations. A genetic memory, if you will. That's not how genetics work, Grayson said flatly. Isn't it? The ancient vampire turned his attention to Grayson, and Kira didn't like the calculating look in those winter-pale eyes. Tell me, Alpha Sterling, what do you know about your associate's family history? Enough to know you're fishing for information you don't have. Matthias laughed, a sound like ice cracking. Oh, but I do have information. Would you like to know why Marcus Blackwood really died? Kira's blood turned to ice. He died in a car accident. Drunk driver. Is that what they told you? Serafina's voice was sickeningly sweet. How interesting. The truth is so much more illuminating. You're lying. Your father was murdered, little Alpha. Killed because he refused to reveal the Moonwell's location. Matthias moved closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. We offered him a simple bargain, the information in exchange for his pack's safety. He chose poorly. The words hit Kira like silver bullets. Everything she believed about her father's death, everything she'd used to fuel her determination to lead the pack, suddenly felt like lies built on lies. You killed him, she whispered. We tried to reason with him first. Marcus was a stubborn man, much like his daughter. Matthias's smile was razor-sharp. But you're going to be more practical, aren't you? After all, we have something he didn't. What? Motivation. The vampire gestured toward Grayson. Your father only had his own life to bargain with. You have something much more valuable to lose. Ice-cold dread settled in Kira's stomach as the threat became clear. They were going to torture Grayson to make her talk. She doesn't know anything, Grayson said firmly. Whatever you think she knows about this Moonwell, you're wrong. Perhaps. But we're going to find out for certain. Serafina moved toward him, producing a silver knife from somewhere in her coat. Werewolves are so wonderfully resilient. It takes quite a lot to actually kill one. Wait, Kira said quickly. Wait, maybe there's something. Some old papers in my father's study. I never paid attention to them, but it was a desperate lie, but it worked. Serafina paused, the knife hovering inches from Grayson's throat. What kind of papers? Maps. Old territorial surveys. He was always obsessing over the pack's history. Kira forced her voice to remain steady. But they're locked in a safe at the pack house. I'd have to. Oh, you won't be going anywhere, Matthias cut her off. But your beta will. Along with a few of our associates, of course.
Jake.
They were going to use Jake to get into the pack house, probably kill him once they had what they wanted. No deal, she said flatly. I'm afraid you don't have a choice. The vampire nodded to Serafina, who pressed the knife against Grayson's throat hard enough to draw blood. The scent hit Kira's nostrils, rich, warm, unmistakably his, and her wolf went completely feral. Power flooded her system as primal protective instincts overrode rational thought. Don't, Grayson said quietly, his gray eyes locked on hers. Don't give them what they want. Touching, Serafina murmured, applying more pressure, but ultimately futile. That's when the warehouse doors exploded inward. Jake burst through the opening in full wolf form, followed by what looked like half the Shadow Moon pack. Behind them came an even bigger surprise, Silver Ridge wolves, led by a massive black wolf that could only be Grayson's beta. Impossible, Matthias snarled. The tracking spells. Don't work on wolves with witch allies, a new voice said from the doorway. Kira's heart leaped as Luna Blackwood stepped into the warehouse, her grandmother's ancient eyes blazing with power. At 78, Luna was still formidable, especially when she was channeling the old magic that flowed through Blackwood blood. Hello, Matthias, Luna said pleasantly. Still trying to steal what doesn't belong to you, I see. The vampire's face contorted with rage. Luna, I should have known you were still alive. Still kicking, unfortunately for you. Luna raised her hand, and the air around her began to shimmer with power. Now, I believe you have something that belongs to my family. Chaos erupted. Vampires and werewolves clashed throughout the warehouse as Luna's magic shattered the silver chains binding Kira and Grayson. Free from the restraints, Kira shifted instantly, her wolf form tearing through the air toward Serafina. But the female vampire was gone, vanished like smoke the moment the fighting began. Matthias and the dark-haired vampire had disappeared as well, leaving only their lesser minions to face the combined fury of two packs. It was over in minutes. When the dust settled, Kira found herself back in human form, wrapped in someone's jacket and standing in the middle of carnage. 3 vampires lay dead, but the leaders had escaped. Kira? Jake reached her first, his eyes scanning her for injuries. Alpha, are you hurt? I'm fine, she managed, though her legs felt unsteady. How did you? Your grandmother. Jake nodded toward Luna, who was helping Grayson to his feet. She felt the disturbance through the pack bonds, called in some old favors. Kira looked around the warehouse, taking in the sight of Shadow Moon and Silver Ridge wolves working together to secure the area. It should have been impossible. Their packs had been enemies for generations. The alliance, she said, understanding flooding through her. You made an alliance. Temporary. Grayson's beta, a stern-faced man named Marcus, corrected. Until the vampire threat is eliminated. Smart boy, Luna said approvingly, moving to Kira's side. Though I suspect there's more to this cooperation than mere practicality. She looked meaningfully between Kira and Grayson, who was pulling on a shirt someone had brought him. Their eyes met across the warehouse, and Kira felt that familiar jolt of electricity. We need to talk, Grayson said. All of us. About what they said about the Moonwell. Luna's expression grew serious. Yes, I suppose it's time you knew the truth. Both of you. Grandmother. Kira started, but Luna held up a hand. Not here. Too many ears, and the night is young. Matthias won't give up easily. The old woman's eyes hardened. He's been hunting our family secrets for 70 years. Now that he knows you're involved, Alpha Sterling, things are going to get much more complicated. Why me? Grayson asked. Luna smiled, but there was no humor in it. Because the Moonwell isn't just hidden in Blackwood territory, young Alpha. It's protected by blood magic, Blackwood blood and Sterling blood, bound together by an oath made during the first pack wars. The revelation hit like a thunderbolt. Kira stared at her grandmother, then at Grayson, pieces of a puzzle she'd never known existed suddenly clicking into place. "You're saying we're—" she began. "Bound by ancient magic, yes. The safety of the Moonwell requires cooperation between your bloodlines." Luna's expression was grim. "Which means, like it or not, you two are going to have to work very closely together." "How closely?" Grayson asked. Luna's smile this time was definitely amused. "Close enough to make things very interesting, I suspect." As if summoned by her words, Jake's radio crackled to life. "Alpha, we've got movement on the eastern border. Multiple contacts, moving fast toward the pack house." Matthias wasn't waiting for them to figure out the ancient magic. He was bringing the fight directly to them. And Kira had the sinking feeling that everything, the vampire attacks, her father's death, even her attraction to Grayson, was connected to secrets that ran deeper than either pack had ever imagined. Chapter 5. The Blackwood pack house had never been designed to accommodate Silver Ridge wolves. Built like a fortress of stone and timber, it stood at the heart of Shadow Moon territory, a symbol of Blackwood power that had endured for 2 centuries. Now it buzzed with activity as former enemies worked side by side, preparing for an assault that could come at any moment. Kira stood in her father's study, watching through the window as Grayson directed his wolves in setting up defensive perimeters. Even exhausted and bloodied from their capture, he moved with an efficiency that spoke of years leading dangerous operations. Her wolf stirred appreciatively at the sight, and she forced herself to look away. "Stop fighting it," Luna said from behind her. Kira turned to find her grandmother settling into Marcus Blackwood's old leather chair, looking far too comfortable in the seat of pack power. "Fighting what?" "The bond. It's going to happen whether you resist or not. Might as well make peace with it." Luna's ancient eyes held a knowing gleam. "Your grandfather fought it too, you know. Took him 3 months to admit he was in love with me." "This isn't love. It's complicated." "Love usually is, dear." Luna gestured for Kira to take the chair across from the desk, especially when it involves ancient magic and family obligations. "Tell me about the oath," Kira said, settling into the seat reluctantly. "The real story, not whatever sanitized version the pack histories contain." Luna was quiet for a long moment, her weathered hands folded in her lap. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of decades. It was 1847 during the Territory Wars. Vampires had allied with several human hunting groups, trying to eliminate all supernatural creatures from the Eastern Territories. The Blackwood and Sterling packs were enemies then, had been for 50 years over a hunting dispute. What changed? Survival. Luna's expression grew grim. Matthias led the vampire forces, personally. He was younger then, but no less ruthless. His coven had developed a way to sever werewolves from their wolf spirits permanently, a kind of spiritual death that was worse than killing. Kira's blood chilled. That's possible? With enough power and the right ritual, yes. They tested it on smaller packs first, turning strong alphas into empty shells. Luna's voice hardened. When they moved against our territories, both packs realized we couldn't fight them separately. So they made an alliance. More than that, your great-great-grandfather, Thomas Blackwood, and Grayson's ancestor, Jonathan Sterling, performed a blood-binding ritual. Their lives, their magic, their very souls became linked. As long as one Sterling and one Blackwood worked together, the Moonwell would remain hidden and protected. The implications made Kira's head spin. And if they don't work together, the binding fails. The Moonwell becomes vulnerable. And everything our ancestors died to protect becomes accessible to whoever's strong enough to take it. A knock on the study door interrupted them. Grayson entered without waiting for permission, his expression grim. "We have a problem," he said. "My scouts just reported vampire activity at 3 different points around your territory. They're not attacking, they're surrounding us." "A siege," Luna observed. How very like Matthias. He always preferred to let his enemies exhaust themselves with worry before striking. "How long can they maintain it?"
Kira asked.
Indefinitely. Vampires don't need food or rest the way we do. Grayson moved to the window, studying the darkening sky. They can afford to wait while we run out of supplies and stamina. Not indefinitely, Luna corrected. The new moon is in 3 days. That's when the Moonwell's power is at its weakest, when the protective barriers can be breached. Matthias will make his move then. 3 days, Kira repeated. Can we hold that long? With Silver Ridge's help, maybe. But there's another problem. Grayson turned from the window, his gray eyes serious. The pack bonds are confused. Having natural enemies working together is creating stress fractures in both hierarchies. Some of my wolves are questioning why we're risking ourselves for Shadow Moon territory. And some of mine are wondering if this is all an elaborate Silver Ridge plot, Kira admitted. Trust doesn't develop overnight. Which brings us to the real issue, Luna said, rising from the chair with sudden purpose. The blood binding isn't just about cooperation, it's about unity. True unity between the Sterling and Blackwood lines. She moved to an ornate cabinet in the corner of the study, retrieving an ancient leather tome that Kira had seen many times, but never been allowed to touch. What's that? Grayson asked. The original ritual texts. Luna placed the book on the desk with reverent care. Everything our ancestors knew about the binding, including how to strengthen it. Kira felt a flutter of unease. Strengthen it how? The blood oath was just the beginning. A foundation, if you will. But the real power comes from a deeper connection, one that transcends pack politics and ancient grudges. Luna opened the book, revealing pages covered in elegant script and detailed illustrations. Some of the symbols were similar to those Kira had seen at the vampire ritual site, but these felt different, warmer, somehow less threatening. The moon well responds to unified purpose, Luna continued. When Sterling and Blackwood blood flows together, when their wolves recognize each other as true mates, the protective barriers become nearly impenetrable. The word, mates, hung in the air like a loaded weapon. You're talking about the mating bond, Grayson said quietly. I'm talking about survival, Luna replied firmly. The partial binding between your ancestors was enough to hide the Moonwell for over a century. But Matthias has grown stronger, learned new magic. To keep the Moonwell safe now, the bond needs to be complete. Kira's wolf was practically vibrating with excitement at the suggestion, but her rational mind rebelled. You're asking us to mate for tactical reasons. I'm not asking anything, Luna interrupted. I'm explaining your options. You can continue as you are, temporary allies with a partial binding that might not hold against sustained vampire assault. Or you can accept what's already building between you and use it to protect both your packs. What's already building? Grayson's voice was carefully neutral, but Kira caught the underlying tension. Luna's smile was distinctly grandmother-like. Oh, please. I may be old, but I'm not blind. The air practically crackles when you two are in the same room. Your wolves recognize each other. Have since the moment you met. Kira felt heat creep up her neck. That's just sexual tension? Absolutely. But it's also much more. Luna closed the book gently. The blood binding creates a resonance between compatible wolves. It's why Thomas and Jonathan's ritual worked. Their descendants would be naturally drawn to each other. You're saying this attraction is artificial? Something that might have been hurt flashed through Grayson's eyes. Not artificial. Amplified. The feelings would exist anyway. The binding just makes them impossible to ignore. Chapter 6. The message the vampires had left behind was worse than anything Kira could have imagined. Carved into the bark of an ancient oak tree on the north perimeter, the symbols seemed to pulse with malevolent energy, even in the pale morning light. It's a challenge, Luna said grimly, running her fingers over the deep grooves. Written in the old tongue. Matthias is calling for single combat, Alpha against Alpha. Meaning what, exactly? Grayson asked, though his expression suggested he already knew. Meaning he wants to face Kira in ritual combat for control of the Moonwell's location. Luna's ancient eyes were troubled. It's an old law, predating the supernatural accords. If she refuses, he can claim cowardice and rally other vampire covens to his cause. And if she accepts? Jake's voice was tight with worry. Then she fights a creature with 3 centuries of combat experience, and if she loses, both packs fall under vampire dominion. Kira stared at the symbols, her wolf pacing restlessly beneath her skin. When? Tonight. Midnight, at the old stone circle in neutral territory. Luna touched Kira's shoulder gently. Dear one, you don't have to do this. There are other ways.
No.
Kira's voice was steady, even as her heart raced. If I refuse, I look weak in front of both packs. Our alliance crumbles, and Matthias gets what he wants anyway. She turned to face the group, Jake, Luna, Grayson, and several senior wolves from both packs. I'll fight him. Like hell you will, Grayson said flatly. The immediate, visceral opposition in his voice surprised everyone, including himself. Kira raised an eyebrow at his tone. Excuse me? You heard me. He stepped closer, his gray eyes blazing. I won't let you throw your life away on some antiquated honor code. You won't let me? Kira's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Since when do you have any say in what I do? Since. He stopped abruptly, jaw clenching as he fought some internal battle. Since what, Grayson? Since I care what happens to you. Damn it. The words exploded out of him with enough force that several pack members took an involuntary step back. The silence that followed was deafening. Luna cleared her throat delicately. Perhaps we should discuss strategy inside. 20 minutes later, they were gathered in the pack house war room, a space that had seen generations of Blackwood Alphas plan battles and negotiate treaties. Maps covered the walls, and the massive oak table bore the scars of decades of heated discussions. The challenge is legal under supernatural law, Luna explained, consulting an ancient text. But there are provisions that might work in our favor. Such as? Kira asked, trying to ignore the way Grayson was radiating tension from across the table. The ritual allows for a champion to fight in the Alpha's place, under specific circumstances. What circumstances? Jake leaned forward eagerly. Luna's expression grew complicated. The champion must be bloodbound to the Alpha. Not just pack bonds, actual blood magic. Understanding crashed over Kira like a cold wave. You're talking about the mating bond. I'm talking about survival, Luna replied. If you and Grayson complete the binding ritual, he can stand as your champion against Matthias. 2 Alphas united have a better chance than one fighting alone. That's convenient, Grayson said, his voice carefully neutral. Mate for tactical advantage. The bitter edge to his words stung more than Kira expected. You make it sound like I'm using you, aren't you? The accusation hung between them like a sword. Around the table, pack members shifted uncomfortably, sensing the emotional undercurrents they couldn't fully understand. Maybe we should, Jake began. No, Kira said sharply, her eyes locked on Grayson's. If he has something to say, he can say it here. Fine. Grayson stood, bracing his hands on the table. You want honesty? Here it is. I've spent the last week watching you risk everything, your life, your pack, your future, for people who may not even appreciate the sacrifice. And now you're ready to walk into certain death because of some ancient honor code that died with our great-grandfathers. It's called leadership. It's called martyrdom, and it's bullshit. His voice rose with each word. You want to complete the mating bond? Then do it because you want me, not because your grandmother thinks it's tactically sound. The raw honesty in his voice silenced everyone in the room. Kira felt her cheeks burn as every eye turned to her, waiting for her response. Everyone out, she said quietly. Alpha, Jake started. Out. The room cleared quickly, leaving only Kira and Grayson facing each other across the scarred oak table. The silence stretched until she thought she might scream from the tension. You want to know why I'm willing to fight Matthias? She said finally. It's not about honor codes or pack politics. It's about the fact that he murdered my father, and he's threatening everything I've sworn to protect. Including me? The quiet question caught her off guard. What? Am I something you're sworn to protect? Or am I just a convenient alliance? Kira stared at him, seeing past the anger to the vulnerability underneath. Is that really what you think? I don't know what to think anymore. He ran a hand through his dark hair, looking suddenly exhausted. 3 days ago, we were enemies. Now I'm ready to fight an ancient vampire for the right to call you mine. Either I'm losing my mind or what? Or this thing between us is real, and it's terrifying the hell out of both of us. The honesty in his voice broke something loose in her chest. All the walls she'd spent years building, all the careful distance she'd maintained to protect herself and her pack, none of it mattered when he looked at her like that. It is real, she whispered. God help me, it's real. The admission seemed to drain all the fight out of him. He moved around the table slowly, stopping just within arm's reach. Then, why does it feel like you're trying to get yourself killed to avoid dealing with it? Because I'm scared. The words came out barely audible. My father died because he loved his pack more than his own safety. My mother left because she couldn't handle the constant danger. Everyone I care about gets hurt and you think pushing me away will keep me safe? I think getting involved with me is the fastest way to end up dead. Grayson's laugh was soft and bitter. Newsflash, sweetheart. I was in mortal danger the moment I decided to care about you. Being your mate won't make that worse. How can you be so calm about this? Because I've spent 6 years wanting something I thought I could never have. And now that it's right in front of me, I'm not letting ancient vampires or pack politics or your martyr complex take it away. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull back. When she didn't, his fingers traced along her jawline with devastating gentleness. I fell for you at a council meeting when you were 16, he said quietly. Spent 2 years hating myself for it, then 4 more trying to convince myself it was just physical attraction. But when I saw that vampire with his hands around your throat, Grayson, I would have burned down the entire forest to get to you. That's not tactical alliance, Kira. That's mate bond, pure and simple. The words should have terrified her. Instead, they sent warmth flooding through her entire system, her wolf practically purring with satisfaction. The ritual, she said. Luna said it would make the binding complete. Forget the ritual. His thumb brushed across her lower lip. Complete the bond because you want to, or don't complete it at all. But don't use ancient magic as an excuse to avoid making a choice. She looked up into his gray eyes and saw everything she'd been too afraid to hope for: desire, respect, and something deeper that made her heart race. I want to, she whispered. I want you. But if we do this, we do it together. Everything that comes after, we face as mates. Even Matthias? Especially Matthias. His smile was sharp as a blade. I owe that bastard for what he did to your father. And for what he tried to do to you. Before she could lose her nerve, Kira rose on her toes and kissed him. It was supposed to be gentle, tentative, a first kiss between people still learning to trust each other. Instead, it was like touching a live wire. Years of suppressed attraction and recent terror exploded between them. His arms came around her waist, lifting her against him as she threaded her fingers through his hair. She could taste his hunger, feel the barely leashed power of his wolf responding to hers. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Well, she said, resting her forehead against his. That was long overdue. I was going to say terrifying. That too. His smile was softer now, less desperate.
So,
the binding ritual? Are you sure? Once we do this, there's no going back. We'll be mated for life. Kira. His voice was patient, amused. I've been yours since I was 18 years old. The ritual just makes it official. A knock on the door interrupted them. Alpha. Jake's voice was carefully neutral. We have a problem. They separated reluctantly, though Grayson kept one hand on her waist as she called for Jake to enter. What now? She asked. Matthias sent another message. The challenge has been moved up. To when? Jake's expression was grim. Tonight. Sunset. And Alpha, he's not coming alone. There are at least 20 vampires moving toward the stone circle. Kira felt Grayson tense beside her. 20? That's not single combat. That's an execution. He's breaking the rules of the challenge, Jake said. But if we don't show up, he can claim victory by default. So we show up with our own backup, Kira said. Both packs, full strength. That would trigger a species war, Jake warned. The Council can go to hell. Grayson's voice was deadly calm. Matthias wants to play dirty?
Fine.
But he's not taking my mate without a fight. The possessive edge to his words sent heat racing through Kira's veins. Whatever happened at the stone circle tonight, they would face it together.
Jake, she said.
Contact both packs. Full mobilization. And find Luna. We're going to need that binding ritual completed before sunset. And if the ritual doesn't work? Jake asked. If the magic isn't strong enough? Kira looked at Grayson, seeing her own determination reflected in his gray eyes. Then we fight them the old-fashioned way, she said. And make them regret ever threatening our packs. As Jake left to carry out her orders, Grayson pulled her close again. No second thoughts, he asked. About the binding?
None.
She paused, studying his face. About fighting 20 vampires? Terrified, he admitted. But not about fighting them with you. Even if we don't survive. His smile was soft and fierce at the same time. Especially then. I'd rather die as your mate than live without you. The words should have been romantic. Instead, they felt like a battle cry. Because tonight, at the ancient stone circle where their ancestors had first bound their bloodlines, Kira and Grayson would either claim their destiny together, or die trying. And with the sun already beginning its descent toward the horizon, they were running out of time to prepare for both possibilities. Chapter 7. The ancient stone circle stood in neutral territory, a ring of weathered granite monoliths that had witnessed supernatural gatherings for over 1,000 years. As the sun touched the western horizon, casting long shadows across the sacred ground, Kira could feel the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. The binding must be completed before we engage Matthias, Luna said, her aged hands steady as she prepared the ritual components. Once the blood magic takes hold, you'll be stronger together than either could be alone. How much stronger? Grayson asked, checking his weapons for the third time. Silver blades gleamed at his waist, and protective wards hung around his neck. Gifts from Luna's collection of supernatural defenses. Strong enough to give you a fighting chance, Luna replied cryptically. The rest depends on your connection to each other. Around the circle's perimeter, both packs had taken positions in the surrounding forest. 43 wolves total, the largest unified force their territories had seen in over a century. Jake coordinated patrol routes while Grayson's beta, Marcus, directed the Silver Ridge contingent. Old enemies working as a seamless unit, all because two alphas had chosen love over legacy feuds. Are you ready? Luna asked, gesturing for Kira and Grayson to approach the center of the circle. Kira's wolf was vibrating with nervous energy, caught between anticipation and terror. In minutes, she would be mated to a man who'd been her enemy just days ago. In an hour, she might be dead. Ready, she said, taking her place beside the ancient altar stone. The ritual itself was surprisingly simple. Luna spoke words in the old tongue, phrases that resonated in Kira's bones despite her not understanding their meaning. She took Grayson's hand, feeling the familiar spark of electricity at the contact, while Luna bound their wrists together with silver cord. Blood calls to blood, Luna intoned, producing a ceremonial blade that gleamed with inner light. Life binds to life. What was divided shall be made whole. The cut across their joined palms was shallow but precise. As their blood mingled and dripped onto the altar stone, power erupted through the circle like lightning. Kira gasped as foreign sensations flooded her consciousness. Grayson's thoughts, his emotions, the fierce protective love that blazed in his chest like a bonfire. Through their bond, she felt his wolf rise to meet hers, two predators recognizing their perfect match. Holy shit, Grayson breathed, his eyes wide with wonder. Language, Luna chided, but she was smiling. The bond is complete. You are mated in the eyes of magic and moon. The euphoria lasted exactly 30 seconds. Alpha, Jake's voice crackled through the radio. They're here. All of them. Through the trees, Kira could see pale figures moving with inhuman grace. Not just 20 vampires, closer to 30, led by Matthias in flowing black robes that made him look like death incarnate. So much for honorable single combat, Grayson muttered, drawing his silver blade. You expected honor from creatures who murdered my father? Kira's own weapons felt lighter in her hands, the mating bond lending her strength and speed she'd never possessed before. Matthias emerged from the forest like a wraith, his ancient eyes fixed on the mated pair standing within the stone circle. Behind him, his coven spread out in a loose semicircle, cutting off escape routes with practiced efficiency. How touching, the vampire lord said, his voice carrying easily across the clearing. A wedding and a funeral, all in one convenient location. Matthias, Luna stepped forward, her aged frame somehow radiating power that made several vampires hesitate. Still hiding behind numbers, I see. Some things never change. Ah, Luna. Still clinging to life despite all reason. His smile was winter cold. I had hoped age might have granted you wisdom. Wisdom enough to know a coward when I see one. Luna's voice cracked like a whip. 30 against 2? Hardly the honorable combat you proposed. Honor is a luxury I abandoned long ago. Matthias gestured to his coven, and they began moving closer to the circle's edge. Besides, these aren't just any two wolves. They're bloodbound now, dangerous in ways their ancestors never imagined. Scared, Kira called out, feeling Grayson's steady presence through their bond. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. Cautious. There's a difference. Matthias studied them with calculating eyes. Though I admit, I'm curious to see how strong this legendary bond really is. Why don't you come find out? Oh, I intend to. But first. He raised one pale hand, and power rippled through the air like heat waves. Let's test your unity under pressure. The attack came from 3 directions at once. Vampires flowed over the circle's protective stones like liquid shadow, moving faster than human eyes could track. But Kira and Grayson weren't human, and through their bond, they fought like a single creature with 4 arms and twice the killing instinct. Kira's blade found the heart of the first vampire to reach her, silver burning through undead flesh like acid. To her left, Grayson took the head off another with a strike that flowed seamlessly from her own movement, as if they trained together for years instead of hours. Impressive, Matthias observed from outside the circle, apparently content to let his minions test their defenses. But stamina will tell in the end. He was right. More vampires poured into the circle, and despite their enhanced abilities, Kira could feel exhaustion beginning to creep into her limbs. Through the bond, she sensed Grayson's growing fatigue as well. They were strong, but not inexhaustible. That's when Luna proved she hadn't been pack matriarch for 7 decades without learning a few tricks. Now, she shouted, and the forest erupted. Shadow Moon and Silver Ridge wolves burst from concealment in perfect coordination, hitting the vampire coven from behind in a wave of fur and fangs. What had been a supernatural execution became a full-scale battle as 43 werewolves engaged 30 vampires in mortal combat. Clever, Matthias said, his composure finally cracking, but ultimately futile. He gestured again, and the air around the stone circle began to thicken with dark magic. The vampires fighting in the forest suddenly moved faster, hit harder, shrugged off wounds that should have been crippling. Blood magic, Luna gasped, recognizing the spell. He's channeling power from the ritual site. Can you counter it? Kira asked, parrying a strike from a vampire who moved like liquid lightning. Not alone, but with the mating bond. Luna's eyes gleamed with sudden inspiration. The moon well. You can access it now, together. Draw on the power your ancestors protected.
How?
Grayson demanded, his silver blade painting arcs of fire through the air as he fought. Trust each other. Open the bond completely, no barriers, no holding back. It should have been impossible in the middle of combat. Opening their minds completely while fighting for their lives went against every survival instinct. But as another wave of vampires pressed toward them, Kira looked into Grayson's gray eyes and saw her own desperate determination reflected there. Together, she asked. Together, he confirmed. They dropped their mental barriers simultaneously. Power roared through the connection like a dam bursting. Not just their individual strength, but something older and deeper. The accumulated magic of 6 generations of Blackwood and Sterling Alphas, all channeled through the completed mating bond. Kira's silver blade began to glow with inner fire. Grayson's movements became fluid as water, deadly as lightning. Around them, the very stones of the ancient circle began to pulse with awakened power. Impossible, Matthias breathed, his confident mask finally slipping. Not impossible, Kira said, feeling magic crackling through her veins like liquid starlight. Just improbable. She and Grayson moved as one, flowing around each other in a deadly dance that left vampire ash in their wake. Where their combined power touched the earth, flowers bloomed despite the approaching winter. Where their blades cut the air, reality itself seemed to sing. But it was too much. The ancient magic flowing through them was meant to be accessed gradually, carefully. Using it all at once in the heat of battle was like trying to drink from a fire hose. Kira, Grayson's voice was strained. I don't think we can maintain this. We don't have to, she realized. We just have to last long enough. Long enough for what? For that. She nodded toward the edge of the clearing, where Marcus was leading a charge of Silver Ridge wolves straight toward Matthias. The vampire lord, distracted by the magical light show in the center of the circle, turned just in time to see 180 pounds of enraged werewolf bearing down on him. The tackle sent both figures tumbling into the forest. Within seconds, the sounds of savage combat echoed through the trees, supernatural strength against supernatural speed in a battle that would determine the fate of both packs. The coven's breaking, Grayson observed, his enhanced senses tracking the flow of battle. Without their leader's magic to sustain them, the remaining vampires were falling back before the coordinated pack assault. Not all of them, Kira warned. Seraphina emerged from the chaos like a pale fury, her beauty transformed into something terrible and alien. Blood stained her white dress, some of it her own, most of it belonging to the 3 wolves she'd killed getting to the circle. You little bitch, she snarled, advancing on Kira with inhuman grace. Do you have any idea what you've cost us? Your lives, hopefully, Kira replied, raising her glowing blade. Our future. Centuries of planning, ruined by 2 mutts who think they're in love. Seraphina attacked with desperate fury, moving faster than anything Kira had ever faced. But she wasn't fighting alone anymore. Through the mating bond, she felt Grayson's tactical mind analyzing the vampire's patterns, his strength flowing into her tired muscles. When Seraphina lunged for her throat, Kira was ready. She sidestepped with inhuman grace, letting the vampire's momentum carry her past, then drove her silver blade between pale shoulder blades. Seraphina's scream echoed across the battlefield as she dissolved into ash. Her centuries of existence ended in a moment of overconfidence. Behind you, Grayson shouted. Kira spun to find one last vampire, a young male she didn't recognize, coming at her with desperate fury. She raised her blade to block, but exhaustion made her movements sluggish. She was going to be too slow. That's when Grayson threw himself between them. The vampire's claws, meant for Kira's heart, tore through Grayson's chest instead. He went down hard, blood spreading across the ancient stones as his attacker prepared for a killing blow. No! Kira's scream of rage shattered the night. Power exploded out of her. Not the controlled magic of the ritual, but pure, primal fury. The attacking vampire was simply erased, dissolved by forces beyond his comprehension. Around the circle, every remaining undead creature fled in terror as the very air began to burn with her wrath. Grayson, she whispered, dropping to her knees beside him. Blood soaked through his shirt, and his breathing was shallow and rapid. Don't you dare die on me. Not after everything. Not planning to, he managed, though his face was pale as moonlight. But you might want to dial back the nuclear option. I think you're scaring the trees. She looked around and realized he was right. Her unleashed power was affecting everything within a quarter-mile radius, leaves glowing like lanterns, flowers blooming out of season, even the ancient stones pulsing with awakened magic. "How do I stop it?" she asked. "Same way you started it. Together." He reached up with a blood-stained hand, and she grasped it tightly. Through their bond, she felt his calm strength flowing into her chaotic fury, tempering it, shaping it into something controllable. The wild magic settled, contained but not diminished. Around them, the battlefield grew quiet as the last of the vampire coven either fled or fell to pack justice. "Is it over?" she asked. "For now," Luna said, approaching with careful steps. The old woman looked exhausted but triumphant. "Matthias is dead." Marcus made sure of that. "The coven is scattered. And the Moonwell." She smiled. "The Moonwell is safe for another generation." "What about him?" Kira asked, helping Grayson sit up despite his protests. The wounds were healing already, enhanced by their bond, but he'd lost a lot of blood. "He'll live," Luna assured her. "Though I'd recommend against any strenuous activity for the next few days." "Define strenuous," Grayson said with a weak grin. "Use your imagination," Luna replied dryly. "But perhaps focus on the fact that you're both alive, mated, and have successfully defended both packs against a threat that's been building for 70 years. Around the circle, wolves were shifting back to human form, checking wounds, and accounting for their people. The cost had been high, 5 dead, a dozen seriously injured, but they had won. "So what happens now?" Kira asked. "The packs, the alliance." "Now," Luna said, "you learn to be mates instead of just allies. And your packs learn to be neighbors instead of enemies." She paused, studying them both with ancient eyes. "Though something tells me that won't be the hardest part." As if summoned by her words, Jake approached with a grim expression. "Alpha," he said carefully, "we've got a situation. The Council is demanding answers about tonight's events. Apparently, species wars tend to make people nervous." Kira looked at Grayson, feeling his steady presence through their bond. Whatever came next, council politics, pack integration, or just learning to live with ancient magic flowing through their veins, they would face it together. "Let them demand," she said finally. "We've got nothing to hide. And everything to protect," Grayson added, his hand finding hers. As the first stars appeared overhead, casting their light on the ancient stone circle where 2 enemies had become mates and 2 packs had become allies, Kira felt something she hadn't experienced in years.
Hope.
Chapter 8. 3 weeks after the battle at the stone circle, Kira stood in the Silver Ridge pack house for the first time in her life. The building was older than her own family's seat, all exposed beams and river stone, built to withstand both time and siege. What surprised her was how much it felt like home. "Stop fidgeting," Grayson said from behind her, his arms sliding around her waist as she stared out the window at the foreign landscape. "They're going to love you. They're going to tolerate me because you ordered them to," she corrected, leaning back against his warmth. The mating bond had only grown stronger over the past weeks, until she could feel his presence like a second heartbeat in her chest. "I don't order my pack to love anyone. That's not how it works." Through the window, she could see Silver Ridge wolves going about their daily routines, training exercises, perimeter patrols, the eternal maintenance that kept a pack territory secure. But she also saw something else. Shadow Moon wolves working alongside them, the 2 groups moving together with an ease that should have taken years to develop. "The council meeting is in 2 hours, she said, changing the subject to something marginally less terrifying than pack integration. "I know." His arms tightened around her. "We'll handle it. Will we? Because last time I checked, accidentally triggering a species war was frowned upon by supernatural authorities. We didn't trigger anything. We defended ourselves against vampire aggression." Grayson's voice carried the calm confidence that had drawn her to him from the beginning. "The council can't fault us for that. They can fault us for the collateral damage." The aftermath of the battle had been extensive. The ancient magic channeled through their mating bond had left permanent changes in the landscape around the stone circle. Trees grew larger and stronger in a quarter-mile radius. Wildlife was more abundant. Even the weather patterns had shifted, bringing unusually warm temperatures to the region. The witches are calling it a beneficial magical anomaly, Grayson pointed out. That has to count for something. The vampires are calling it an unprecedented act of supernatural aggression. That counts for something too. A knock on the door interrupted their conversation. Marcus, Grayson's beta, entered with the careful expression he wore whenever he had complicated news to deliver. The council representatives have arrived, he said. All 5 species are represented. Kira's stomach dropped. A full council meant they were taking this seriously. Vampire representative, witch spokesperson, fae ambassador, demon liaison, and human supernatural affairs coordinator. The last time all 5 had gathered for a territorial dispute was during the Salem Accords. Where are they meeting us? Grayson asked. Neutral ground. The old courthouse in Pine Ridge. Marcus paused. Alpha Sterling, there's something else. The vampire representative is Matthias's successor. Of course it is, Kira muttered. Because nothing about this situation could be simple. 20 minutes later, they walked into the Pine Ridge courthouse hand in hand, presenting a united front despite the nerves churning in both their stomachs. The building had been renovated to accommodate supernatural hearings, reinforced windows, climate control for temperature-sensitive species, and wards to prevent magical interference. The council representatives sat behind a curved table that put Kira in mind of a judicial bench. She recognized most of them from previous territorial hearings, but the vampire representative was new, a pale woman with silver hair and eyes like winter frost. Alpha's Blackwood and Sterling, the witch spokesperson, a middle-aged woman named Patricia Crane, called them forward. Thank you for appearing before the council. Thank you for accommodating us, Grayson replied with perfect diplomatic courtesy. Let's dispense with pleasantries, the vampire representative said, her voice carrying centuries of authority. I am Celeste Morvain, current head of the Eastern Vampire Coalition. I'm here to address the unprovoked massacre of 30 members of Matthias Thorne's coven. Unprovoked. Kira's voice rose despite her best efforts to remain calm. Your people murdered my father and threatened both our packs. We defended ourselves. You used ancient magic to essentially declare war on an entire species. We used ancient magic to stop an invasion force. Ladies, Patricia Crane interrupted before the argument could escalate. Perhaps we could review the facts in order? What followed was an hour of testimony, evidence presentation, and careful diplomatic dancing. The council examined physical evidence from the ritual site, witness statements from pack members, and even magical traces left by the battle itself. The evidence is clear, the Fae ambassador said finally, his ethereally beautiful face thoughtful. Matthias Thorne violated the Salem Accords by initiating aggressive action against recognized pack territories. The werewolf response, while dramatic, falls within acceptable defensive parameters. Acceptable? Celeste's voice was ice-cold. They obliterated 30 vampires with prehistoric magic. They defended their people against overwhelming odds. The demon liaison rumbled, his red eyes glowing with inner fire. Surely the coalition doesn't fault them for effective tactics? I fault them for the precedent this sets. What happens when every supernatural dispute is settled with ancient magic and military force? The same thing that's been happening for centuries, the human coordinator said dryly. Except now it's documented and regulated. Patricia Crane studied the paperwork before her, then looked up at Kira and Grayson. The council finds no fault with your actions during the vampire incursion. However, the magical anomaly created by your union requires ongoing monitoring. What kind of monitoring?
Kira asked.
Quarterly reports on the affected area, wildlife surveys, environmental assessments, magical resonance readings. The witch's expression softened slightly. Think of it as supernatural environmental protection. The magic you awakened is powerful enough to affect the natural balance. And if we refuse? Grayson's voice was carefully neutral. You won't, Celeste said with cold certainty. Because refusal would be seen as evidence that you can't control the power you've accessed. and uncontrolled magical anomalies tend to be contained by whatever means necessary. The threat was clear. Comply with monitoring or face council intervention that could include magical suppression of their bond. Will comply, Kira said quickly, feeling Grayson's agreement through their connection. Excellent, Patricia smiled. There is one more matter to address. The territorial dispute that started this whole situation. The boundary survey confirmed Shadowmoon's claim, Grayson said. The matter is settled. Is it? Because our records indicate both packs have since expanded beyond your traditional boundaries. The witch consulted her notes. Integrated patrol routes, shared training facilities, combined pack houses. Kira realized where this was heading. You're talking about a formal merger. I'm talking about acknowledging reality. For all practical purposes, you're already operating as a single pack with dual leadership. Patricia's expression was businesslike. The council prefers official recognition to de facto arrangements. What would that mean? Grayson asked. New territorial designation, updated registration with the Supernatural Census Bureau, revised tax assessments. The human coordinator looked bored. Paperwork mostly, though you'd need to designate a single alpha for official purposes. The room fell silent. Kira felt her chest tighten as implications raced through her mind. Everything they'd built over the past weeks, the careful balance between their packs, the respect she'd earned as an alpha in her own right, could be destroyed by bureaucratic necessity. And if we refuse formal merger? She asked. Then you maintain separate pack status, which means separate territories. Celeste's smile was sharp. No more integrated operations, no more shared resources. Back to the traditional boundaries you've both exceeded. It was an impossible choice. Maintain their independence and destroy the alliance that had saved both packs, or merge officially and lose their individual identities. We need time to consider, Grayson began. Actually, Kira interrupted, an idea forming in her mind. I have a proposal. Every eye in the room turned to her. Through the mating bond, she felt Grayson's surprise and concern, but also his trust in whatever she was planning. Dual alpha status, she said. Official recognition of joint leadership over merged territories. Patricia frowned. There's no precedent for that arrangement. There's no precedent for a lot of things we've done recently, Kira pointed out. But they've worked out well for everyone involved. Dual alphas would require unanimous council approval, the Fae ambassador warned, and ongoing oversight to ensure stability. More oversight, Grayson muttered. But independence, Kira added. For both packs and both bloodlines. The council members exchanged glances, engaging in the kind of silent communication that came from centuries of political maneuvering. The coalition would accept dual alpha status, Celeste said finally, provided both leaders submit to periodic psychological evaluation. History shows that shared power arrangements can become unstable. The demon courts concur, the red-eyed liaison added, assuming appropriate safeguards against power abuse. The Fae agree, contingent on environmental protection measures for the magical anomaly. The Witch Council supports the proposal, with quarterly magical assessments. All eyes turned to the human coordinator, who shrugged. Humans are used to weird governmental structures. Dual leadership is the least strange thing I've seen this year. Patricia Crane nodded slowly. Very well. The Council recognizes the Shadowmoon Silver Ridge Alliance as a single-pack entity under dual alpha leadership. She fixed both Kira and Grayson with a stern look. Contingent on the oversight measures discussed, and with the understanding that any future territorial expansion requires Council pre-approval. Agreed, they said simultaneously. Then this hearing is concluded. Patricia began gathering her papers. You'll receive official documentation within the week. Congratulations on your unique arrangement. As the council representatives filed out, Kira felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. They'd won official recognition, but at the cost of permanent supernatural oversight. No regrets? Grayson asked as they walked toward the courthouse exit. About the council oversight? Some. She squeezed his hand. About everything else? None. Even about being stuck with me for the rest of your life? Especially about that. They emerged into afternoon sunlight to find both packs waiting in the courthouse square. Jake stood with Marcus, their faces tense with anxiety. Behind them, 40-plus wolves watched their leaders with the kind of attention reserved for life-changing announcements. "Well," Jake called out. "How much trouble are we in?" "None," Kira replied, raising her voice so everyone could hear. "The council has officially recognized our alliance. We're one pack now, under dual alpha leadership." The cheer that went up could probably be heard 3 towns over. "So, what happens now?" Marcus asked as the celebration died down. Kira looked at Grayson, seeing her own determination reflected in his gray eyes. "Now we build something new. Something that honors both our histories while creating a future neither pack could achieve alone. And we deal with whatever the council throws at us next," Grayson added with a grin. "Together." As the combined pack began making plans for celebration and integration, Kira felt the last of her old fears melting away. She'd spent her entire life preparing to lead alone, to carry the weight of pack responsibility on her own shoulders. Now she had a partner in leadership, in love, and in whatever challenges lay ahead. It was, she decided, a vast improvement over the old way of doing things, even if it did come with an unprecedented amount of supernatural paperwork. Chapter 9. The Harvest Moon celebration had always been Shadow Moon Pack's most important gathering, a time when the pack honored their ancestors, celebrated the year's accomplishments, and strengthened the bonds that held them together. This year, for the first time in pack history, they were sharing it with former enemies. Kira stood on the main house's wraparound porch, watching wolves from both packs work together to prepare the sacred grove. Silver Ridge members hung lanterns while Shadow Moon wolves arranged the traditional altar. Children from both groups chased each other between the trees, their laughter echoing through the forest like music. "Nervous?" Grayson asked, appearing beside her with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. "Terrified," she admitted, accepting the cup gratefully. "This ritual has been performed the same way for 200 years. Now we're changing everything." "Not everything. The important parts stay the same, honoring the past, celebrating the present, looking toward the future." He settled against the porch railing, close enough that she could feel his warmth. "We're just doing it with more people." Through the mating bond, she felt his calm confidence, the steady presence that had become her anchor over the past month. It still amazed her how quickly she'd adapted to sharing her thoughts and emotions with another person. "Luna's been working on the modified ritual for weeks," she said. "But there's no guarantee it will work with 2 bloodlines instead of 1. Then we'll figure it out as we go. We're good at that." Below them, Jake was directing the placement of ceremonial stones while Marcus coordinated the lighting arrangements. The 2 betas had formed an efficient partnership that mirrored their alpha's relationship, professional respect built on shared purpose. "Alpha Kira," a young voice called from the edge of the grove. Emma, one of the Shadow Moon children, came running up the porch steps with the boundless energy of a 7-year-old. Behind her followed Thomas, a Silver Ridge boy about the same age who'd been her shadow ever since the packs had merged. "Is it true that you and Alpha Grayson are going to do magic tonight?" Emma asked, her eyes wide with excitement. "We're going to participate in the traditional ceremony," Kira corrected gently. "Same as we do every year." "But this year there's going to be 2 alphas," Thomas added. "And the moon magic works different with mates." The boy's matter-of-fact delivery made Grayson choke on his coffee. "Where did you hear that?" "Elder Luna told us. She said the harvest blessing would be stronger this year because you and Alpha Kira are bloodbound." Thomas paused, then added with the devastating honesty of childhood, "She also said you're probably going to have babies soon." Kira felt heat flood her cheeks. "Luna said what?" "That the pack will grow," Emma said helpfully. "New babies, new members, new territory. The moon likes it when packs get bigger." Speaking of new members, Jake called from the grove. "We've got incoming." A convoy of vehicles was approaching through the forest, official cars with council insignia. Kira's stomach dropped as she recognized the lead vehicle. "The Oversight Committee," Grayson muttered. "I forgot they were coming tonight." "Of course they are." Nothing says sacred pack ritual like supernatural bureaucrats taking notes. The Council's Environmental Monitoring Committee consisted of 3 representatives, a witch specializing in magical anomalies, a fae expert in territorial magic, and a human scientist who somehow managed to apply conventional research methods to distinctly unconventional phenomena. Dr. Sarah Chin, the human scientist, was the first to approach the porch. She was a compact woman in her 40s who treated supernatural events with the same methodical precision she'd once applied to marine biology. Alphas, she greeted them, consulting a tablet covered in sensor readings. I hope you don't mind our presence during tonight's ceremony. The magical resonance from your mating bond should be particularly strong during the harvest moon. As long as you don't interfere with the ritual itself, Kira said carefully. Oh, we're strictly observers. Though I admit, I'm fascinated by the potential implications of dual alpha magic. Dr. Chen's eyes lit with scientific enthusiasm. The preliminary readings suggest your combined power could permanently alter the local ecosystem. Is that good or bad? Grayson asked. Depends on your perspective. From an environmental standpoint, the changes have been overwhelmingly positive. Increased biodiversity, enhanced plant growth, cleaner water sources. She paused. From a magical stability standpoint, you're essentially creating a new type of supernatural territory. Meaning, the Fae representative said as he joined them, you're the first mated alpha pair to fully access ancestral power in over 3 centuries. We have no idea what the long-term effects might be. Lysander looked like every fantasy novel's idea of an elf, tall, ethereal, with silver hair and eyes like starlight. But his expression was troubled as he studied the grove below. The magic here is awakening, he said slowly. Responding to your bond in ways we didn't anticipate. Tonight's ritual will either stabilize the changes or amplify them beyond our ability to predict. You're saying we might accidentally break something?
Kira asked.
I'm saying you might accidentally create something entirely new. The witch representative, a stern-faced woman named Morgana Blackthorn, climbed the porch steps with careful dignity. Ancient magic doesn't follow modern rules. When you channel ancestral power through a mating bond, you're essentially rewriting the supernatural laws that govern this territory. And that's bad because rewritten laws have a tendency to spread, Morgana replied. What happens here tonight could influence pack territories across the continent. The weight of that responsibility settled on Kira's shoulders like a lead blanket. She'd wanted to honor her ancestors and strengthen her pack. She hadn't intended to potentially reshape supernatural society. No pressure, Grayson said dryly, echoing her thoughts through their bond. Actually, Dr. Chin said, checking her instruments again, there might be a way to contain the magical expansion while still allowing the ritual to proceed.
How?
Willing participation from the entire pack. If everyone present actively channels their energy into the ceremony, it creates a closed magical circuit. The power flows through the pack bonds instead of bleeding into the wider environment. You're talking about a group ritual, Luna said, appearing from the grove with dirt on her hands and satisfaction on her face. I've been hoping someone would suggest that. Grandmother, Kira started, the traditional ceremony. The traditional ceremony was designed for a single bloodline with limited power, Luna interrupted. You're not a single bloodline anymore, and your power is far from limited. It's time to create new traditions. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, both packs gathered in the sacred grove. The clearing had been transformed with lanterns, flowers, and ceremonial symbols that merged Shadow Moon and Silver Ridge traditions. At the center stood the ancient altar, now bearing artifacts from both bloodlines. This feels different, Jake murmured, standing beside Kira as the pack formed concentric circles around the altar. He was right. The air itself seemed to hum with potential energy, and every wolf present could feel the magic gathering like an approaching storm. Shadow Moon Pack, Kira called out, her voice carrying easily through the grove. For 2 centuries, we have gathered under the harvest moon to honor our ancestors and seek their blessing for the year ahead. Silver Ridge Pack, Grayson continued, for just as long, We have marked this night with gratitude for the past and hope for the future. Tonight, they said together, we gather as one pack under one moon, seeking one blessing. Luna stepped forward, carrying a ceremonial bowl carved from ancient oak. The ritual requires blood from both alpha lines, freely given and willingly shared. Kira and Grayson approached the altar together, their hands joining over the bowl as Luna produced the ceremonial blade. The silver edge gleamed in the lantern light as it opened shallow cuts across their palms. As their blood mingled in the bowl, power erupted through the grove like lightning. But this time, it was contained. Instead of radiating outward into the forest, the magic flowed through the pack bonds connecting every wolf present. Kira felt it move from her to Grayson, from him to Jake and Marcus, then out through the entire assembled group in waves of warmth and strength. The ancestors hear us, Luna intoned, her aged voice carrying new power. They approve the joining of bloodlines, the merging of destinies. Around the grove, lanterns began to glow brighter without any additional fuel. Flowers bloomed out of season, and the very air shimmered with visible magic. We ask for their blessing on the pack that was, the pack that is, and the pack that will be, Kira and Grayson said together. The response came not in words, but in sensation, approval flowing through every pack bond, strength settling into every wolf's bones, and a deep sense of rightness that spoke to genetic memories spanning generations. It's working, Dr. Chen whispered to her fellow monitors, her instruments recording readings that would rewrite several textbooks on pack magic. But the ritual wasn't finished. The ancestors speak, Luna announced, her eyes wide with wonder. They offer a gift to the merged bloodlines. What kind of gift? Grayson asked. The knowledge to protect what you've built. The wisdom to lead what you've created. Luna's voice dropped to a whisper. And the power to defend it against any threat. Magic flowed through the mating bond like molten gold, carrying with it visions of the past and glimpses of possible futures. Kira saw the first Blackwood Alpha claiming these lands, the first Sterling wolves establishing their territory, the long history of conflict and cooperation that had led to this moment. But she also saw what could come, a pack strong enough to protect the innocent, wise enough to navigate supernatural politics, and unified enough to weather any storm. Do you accept the ancestors' gift? Luna asked. We accept, they replied together. Power settled into their bones, not the wild magic of battle, but something deeper and more permanent. Through the pack bonds, every wolf present felt the change, strength, wisdom, and an unshakable sense of belonging. The ritual is complete, Luna announced. The bloodlines are merged, the packs are unified, and the ancestors are pleased. As the formal ceremony concluded and the pack began to celebrate with food and music, Kira found herself alone with Grayson beside the altar. Any regrets? He asked, echoing the question he'd posed weeks earlier. Only that it took us so long to get here. She leaned into his warmth, watching their pack, their family, celebrate around them. Though I have to admit, I'm curious about what the ancestors meant by defending against any threat. Hopefully, we won't find out anytime soon. With our luck, we'll find out next week. Grayson laughed, pulling her closer as the first stars appeared overhead. Then we'll handle it together, just like everything else. As the harvest moon reached its zenith, casting silver light over a pack that had never existed before tonight, Kira felt a deep sense of completion. She'd spent her entire life preparing to lead alone, carrying the weight of tradition and responsibility on her own shoulders. Now she had a partner, a unified pack, and the blessing of ancestors who had somehow known this day would come. It was, she decided, exactly what she'd been waiting for without knowing it. Alpha Kira. Alpha Grayson. Emma's voice called from the celebration. Come dance with us. Duty calls, Grayson said with a grin. Actually, Kira corrected, taking his hand and leading him toward the music. That's not duty. That's joy. And as they joined their pack in celebration under the ancient trees, surrounded by the laughter of former enemies who had become family, Kira realized that sometimes the best endings were actually new beginnings. Chapter 10. 6 months later. The nursery in the main pack house had once been Marcus Blackwood's private study, a austere room lined with ancient texts and territorial maps. Now it was painted in soft greens and yellows, with hand-carved wolves dancing along the walls and a mobile of silver moons hanging over the crib that Grayson had built with his own hands. "She's going to be spoiled rotten," Kira observed, watching her mate add yet another protective ward to the already heavily warded room. "She's going to be safe," Grayson corrected, his gray eyes soft as he studied his handiwork. "There's a difference." "Grayson." Kira's voice was patient, amused. "Our daughter isn't even born yet, and she already has the protection of the most magically powerful pack in North America, 3 different council monitoring committees, and grandparents who could level city blocks if properly motivated. I think she'll be fine." Famous last words. But he was smiling as he said it, the expression that had replaced his old arrogance with something warmer and infinitely more attractive. Kira settled into the rocking chair by the window, one hand resting on her rounded belly where their daughter kicked with the vigorous energy of a future alpha. "Besides," she added, "if she's anything like her parents, she'll be the one doing the protecting." Through the nursery window, she could see the pack grounds transformed by 6 months of integration. The old territorial boundaries had been erased, replaced by a sprawling complex that accommodated both bloodlines. Children played in gardens that bloomed year-round thanks to the lingering magic from their mating bond. Adults worked together on projects that would have been impossible when the packs were separate. It was everything she'd dreamed of but had never dared to hope for. "The council's latest report came in," Grayson said, settling on the window seat beside her chair. "Dr. Chen thinks the magical anomaly has stabilized. And the others?" "Lysander says we've created a new type of supernatural territory, one that enhances the natural world instead of dominating it. Morgana thinks we've accidentally rediscovered pre-industrial pack magic." He paused. "And Celeste admits the vampire casualties from our bonding have actually improved relations between our species." "How's that?" "Apparently, eliminating Matthias's faction removed a significant source of interspecies tension. The new vampire leadership is interested in peaceful coexistence rather than territorial expansion." Kira shook her head in amazement. "So, our completely accidental magical explosion solved a political problem that's been building for decades. Lucky us." A soft knock on the nursery door interrupted them. Luna entered with the careful steps of someone carrying precious cargo, a tea service on an antique silver tray. "How are my granddaughter and her incubator feeling today?" she asked, setting the tray on the small table between them. "Your granddaughter is practicing for the Olympic soccer team," Kira replied, rubbing her ribs where a particularly vigorous kick had landed. "And her incubator is wondering if she inherited her father's stubborn streak." "Of course she did. She's also inherited your protective instincts, your grandmother's magical sensitivity, and enough ancestral power to make the council nervous." Luna poured tea with the grace of long practice. "She's going to be quite the handful." "Any new predictions from the ancestor dreams?" Grayson asked. Over the past months, Luna had been receiving increasingly detailed visions during the full moon, messages from long-dead pack leaders about the future of their merged bloodlines. Most were encouraging, but some carried warnings about challenges yet to come. The usual. "Change is coming. The pack will be tested. Your daughter has an important destiny." Luna's ancient eyes twinkled with mischief. Though last night's dream did include something new, which was a mate for her. Apparently, the ancestors are already planning the next generation's love story. Kira nearly choked on her tea. "She's not even born yet. Werewolf genetics work in mysterious ways, dear. The bloodlines that produce strong alphas tend to find each other across generations." Luna settled into the third chair with satisfaction. "Besides, wouldn't you rather know she'll find love than worry about her dying alone?" "I'd rather focus on getting her safely born before we start planning her wedding," Kira said dryly. "Speaking of which," Grayson said, pulling a sealed envelope from his jacket, "we got the final adoption papers for the Morrison children." The Morrison family had been refugees from a pack war in the Western Territories, 2 adult wolves and 3 young children who'd arrived at their borders 6 weeks ago seeking asylum. What should have been a temporary arrangement had become permanent when the children bonded with several pack members, particularly Jake and his mate Sarah. "Jake's going to be insufferable," Kira predicted, reading through the official documents. "He's wanted kids for years. He's earned it. So has Sarah." Grayson's expression grew serious. "Though this does bring our pack population to over 80. We're officially one of the largest territorial packs in the country. Growing pains. Growing opportunities. Dr. Chin thinks our magical enhancement field could support twice that number without environmental strain." The magical enhancement field, as the council's scientists had dubbed it, was the most visible result of their completed mating bond. Within a 5-mile radius of the pack houses, everything flourished. Plants grew stronger, animals lived longer, and even the weather seemed more favorable. It was like living in a perpetual state of natural blessing. "Any word from the other packs about membership requests?"
Kira asked.
3 applications this week. 2 from small packs whose territories were compromised by industrial development, 1 from a group of young wolves looking to start fresh. The steady stream of membership requests had been unexpected but not unwelcome. Their pack's reputation for accepting refugees and integrating former enemies had spread throughout the supernatural community, making them a destination for wolves seeking new beginnings. "We'll need to expand again," Kira mused, thinking of the construction projects already underway. More housing, larger training facilities, probably another school building. And more bureaucracy. The council wants detailed integration reports for every new member. "The price of success. The price of being interesting to supernatural authorities," Grayson corrected. "Though I have to admit, it beats being enemies." A commotion outside drew their attention to the window. In the main courtyard, a crowd was gathering around what looked like an official vehicle, but not one from any council committee they recognized. "Are we expecting visitors?" Luna asked. "Not that I know of." Grayson was already moving toward the door. "I'll go check." But before he could leave the nursery, Jake's voice crackled through the pack communication system. "All alphas to the main entrance. We have distinguished guests." "Distinguished how?" Kira asked into her radio as she struggled to stand from the rocking chair. "The kind that travel with diplomatic immunity and armed escorts." Grayson helped her to her feet with the careful attention he'd shown throughout her pregnancy. "Ready for whatever this is?" "With you? Always." They made their way to the main entrance, where a small crowd of pack members had gathered to observe the visitors. 2 black SUVs sat in the circular drive, official plates identifying them as belonging to the Federal Supernatural Affairs Bureau, the human government's highest-level supernatural oversight agency. Director Amanda Cross emerged from the lead vehicle, a tall woman in her 50s who'd built her career on successfully managing supernatural crises. Behind her came an aide carrying an official briefcase and wearing the kind of expression that suggested paperwork was involved. "Alpha's Blackwood and Sterling," Director Cross said, approaching with a warm smile that didn't quite hide the shrewd intelligence in her eyes. "Congratulations on your upcoming addition to the family." "Thank you," Kira replied carefully. "Though, I suspect you didn't drive 3 hours just to wish us well." "Perceptive as always. May we speak privately?" 10 minutes later, they were gathered in the formal sitting room, Kira and Grayson on one side, Director Cross and her aide on the other, with Luna serving as unofficial pack representative. "The situation is this," Director Cross began without preamble. "The success of your pack integration has attracted attention at the highest levels of government. Supernatural integration has been a policy goal for decades, but the practical applications have been limited." "Meaning?" "Meaning most attempts at interpack cooperation have failed spectacularly. Territorial disputes, cultural conflicts, resource competition. The list of potential problems is extensive."
She paused.
"You've somehow avoided all of them." "We had good motivation," Grayson said simply. "You had love," Director Cross corrected. "And apparently, that made all the difference." She gestured to her aide, who opened the briefcase and withdrew a thick folder marked with official seals. "The President's Supernatural Advisory Council has asked me to make you a proposition," Director Cross continued. We want to study your integration model with the goal of implementing it nationwide. Kira felt her stomach drop. Study how? Detailed documentation of your processes, regular interviews with PAC members, observational studies of your governance model. The director's expression was businesslike. In exchange, we're prepared to offer significant federal support, funding for expansion, regulatory protection, priority status for refugee placement. You want to turn us into a government laboratory, Grayson said flatly. We want to learn from your success, so we can replicate it elsewhere. The supernatural community represents roughly 8% of the national population, but integration efforts have been stalled for years. If your model can be scaled up, then what we've built here becomes a template for forced integration everywhere, Kira finished. What happens to PACs that don't want to merge, that prefer their traditional boundaries? They maintain their current status. This would be voluntary, until it becomes the only way to access federal resources, Luna interjected. Until traditional PACs are economically forced to merge or face isolation. Director Cross had the grace to look uncomfortable. There are risks to any policy initiative, but the potential benefits are not worth sacrificing PAC autonomy, Kira said firmly. Our integration worked because we chose it freely, under extraordinary circumstances. Turning it into government policy would destroy everything that made it successful. And if we refuse your proposition? Grayson asked. Then you continue as you are, with our best wishes for your continued success. Director Cross's tone remained pleasant, but there was steel underneath. Though federal support for supernatural communities may become more selective in the future, the threat was politely phrased but unmistakable. Cooperate with the study, or face reduced government support for refugee assistance, territorial protection, and integration services. We need time to discuss this with the PAC, Kira said finally. Of course. Though I should mention, the president is particularly interested in this initiative. It would be unfortunate if such a promising model couldn't be shared with the broader supernatural community. After Director Cross and her aide left, the three of them sat in silence for several minutes. They're not going to take no for an answer, Grayson said finally. They'll have to, Kira replied. What we've built here isn't a government program. It's a family. A family that's about to face political pressure unlike anything we've dealt with before, Luna observed. The ancestors' warnings about defending against threats may have been more literal than we realized. Then we defend, Kira said simply. Together like we always have. Against the federal government? Against anyone who threatens our PAC. She placed her hand over her belly, feeling their daughter's strong heartbeat beneath her palm. This is her inheritance, a PAC united by choice, strengthened by love, and protected by people who believe in something bigger than themselves. The council will side with us, Grayson said thoughtfully. They've invested too much in monitoring our success to let it be co-opted by human politics. And the other PACs will support us once they understand what's at stake. No Alpha wants government oversight of their integration decisions. As if summoned by their conversation, Jake's voice came through the communication system again. Alphas, we've got movement on the eastern border. Multiple vehicles, unknown affiliation. Through the mating bond, Kira felt Grayson's immediate alertness. After months of peace, their protective instincts were still razor-sharp. More government representatives? She asked. Or reporters? Luna suggested grimly. If word has gotten out about the federal interest, then we handle it the same way we've handled everything else, Kira said, struggling to her feet once more. Together, as a family, with complete honesty about who we are and what we stand for. Even if it means taking on the federal government? Especially then. She reached for Grayson's hand, feeling his strength flow through their bond. Our daughter is going to inherit a PAC that's free to choose its own destiny. Whatever it takes to ensure that will do. As they walked toward the door to face whatever new challenge awaited them, Kira felt the familiar surge of power that came from standing beside her mate, backed by their PAC, defending everything they'd built together. 6 months ago, they'd been enemies forced to work together by circumstance. Now they were partners ready to take on the world to protect their family. It was, she decided, a remarkable transformation. And whatever came next, they would face it the way they'd faced everything else, together, with love as their strength and unity as their shield. After all, they'd already proven that enemies could become lovers. Now it was time to prove that lovers could become legends.